The containment alarm screamed through Station Kepler-7 with a shriek that made every species on board freeze in primal terror. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in blood-colored warnings as the automated voice echoed through every speaker. Apex Predator Containment Breach. Level 9 Threat. All personnel evacuate to safe zones. Repeat. Apex Predator loose. In the central security hub, Commander Vraltek's 4 eyes widened in horror as he watched the security feeds. The creature that had escaped from the Xenobiology Research Wing was a nightmare given flesh. A Kravathi Deathmaw, one of the most feared apex predators in known space. 8 feet of rippling muscle, covered in obsidian scales harder than titanium, with jaws that could crush durasteel and claws that had evolved specifically for eviscerating prey. Its 6 compound eyes gave it nearly 360-degree vision, and the thermal pits along its skull meant it could hunt in absolute darkness. How did it escape? Vraltek demanded, his crystalline hands trembling as he pulled up the breach protocols. The transport cage failed during transfer to the high-security wing. His assistant squeaked, already backing toward the exit. Sir, we need to evacuate. That thing has killed entire colonial militias. The last time one got loose on Serati Prime, it took a battalion of heavy infantry 3 days to bring it down. The casualty count was... I know the numbers. Vraltek snapped, his voice cracking with fear. He watched the feeds as sentient beings from a dozen species scrambled in panic, sealing themselves behind emergency bulkheads. The Deathmaw prowled through the corridors, its head swiveling with predatory intelligence, tasting the air with a forked tongue the size of a human arm. This was every station commander's worst nightmare. Kravathi Deathmaws were classified as apex predators by the Galactic Council, creatures so dangerous that most civilized worlds had banned their presence entirely. They were obligate carnivores, requiring fresh meat, and they had been known to develop a taste for sentient prey. Their hunting instinct was so refined that they could track a target across kilometers by scent alone. Where is it heading? Vraltek demanded. His assistant's face went pale purple. Deck 7, Section C. Sir. It's moving toward the habitat rings. Vraltek felt his tertiary heart skip a beat. The habitat rings. Thousands of civilians, families, children, and between the Deathmaw and the populated sections there was only the kitchen district, he whispered. Alert Security Team Alpha. Tell them to form a defensive perimeter at the... Sir, Security Team Alpha has already sealed themselves in the armory. Team Beta locked down the bridge. Team Gamma evacuated to the shuttle bay. Vraltek stared at his assistant in disbelief. They abandoned their posts? Sir, it's a Kravathi Deathmaw. Even with plasma rifles and powered armor, the survival rate for engaging one directly is less than 15%. The protocol clearly states. I don't care what the protocol states. Vraltek roared, his voice breaking. There are civilians in those sections. Someone has to. The alarm blared again. On the security feed, the Deathmaw had entered the kitchen district. It moved with the liquid grace of a born killer, its head low, body coiled like a spring. Its thermal sensors swept the area searching for prey. And then it stopped. The creature's head tilted, its compound eyes focusing on something ahead. Vraltek leaned closer to the screen, trying to see what had captured the apex predator's attention. In the middle of the main galley kitchen, standing alone in front of a massive industrial stove, was a human. Not just any human, the station's head chef, a male named Jake Rodriguez who had arrived 3 months ago from Earth's culinary fleet. He wore his white chef's uniform, complete with the ridiculous tall hat humans insisted their cooks wear. He hadn't evacuated. He hadn't sealed himself behind a blast door. He was cooking. Vraltek watched in absolute horror as the Deathmaw crouched low, its muscles bunching for a lethal pounce. The creature's jaws opened slightly, revealing rows of teeth like serrated knives, each one designed to tear through flesh and bone with ease. And then, without even turning around, the human spoke. Kitchen's closed, Mittens. Get out. The Deathmaw froze. Vraltek's 4 eyes blinked in asynchronous confusion. Did he just call the most dangerous apex predator in known space Mittens? The Kravathi Deathmaw's 6 compound eyes narrowed. In its 300 years of existence, no prey had ever stood its ground. They ran. They hid. They screamed. Those were the natural responses to an apex predator, responses hardwired into every species through millions of years of evolution. Prey fled. Predators pursued. This was the fundamental law of nature. Yet this small, soft-skinned creature wasn't fleeing. The human, this Jake, continued stirring something in a massive pot, the spoon making rhythmic circles against the metal. The Deathmaw's thermal sensors detected the heat signature from the stove, the bubbling liquid, the various cooking implements arranged with precise organization around the workspace. "I know you can understand me," Jake said, still not turning around. "The briefing said Kravathi are sapient. So let me be crystal clear. I've got 47 kilos of beef bourguignon on the heat, 6 dozen soufflés in the oven with 8 minutes left, and a chocolate sculpture that took me 6 hours to construct. You are not going to ruin my dinner service." The Deathmaw took another step forward, its claws clicking against the deck plating. Up close, Jake looked even more vulnerable. 5.5 feet tall, maybe 80 kilograms. No scales. No natural weapons. No armor plating. His skin was soft, pink, completely undefended. By every measurable standard, he should be dead already. In the security hub, Vraltek was frantically pulling up the human's personnel file. "What do we know about this Jake Rodriguez? Does he have combat training? Psionic abilities? Some kind of hidden cybernetic enhancement?" His assistant's fingers flew across the console. "No, sir. According to his file, he's just a chef. Born in a place called Texas on Earth. 23 years in the culinary industry. Previously worked on 3 different stations. His references describe him as passionate about his kitchen and temperamental when interrupted during meal prep. Sir, I don't understand. Why isn't he running?" Vraltek didn't have an answer. Back in the kitchen, the Deathmaw circled slowly to the left, trying to flank its prey. Jake finally turned, and for the first time, the apex predator saw the human's face. He wasn't afraid. He was annoyed. "Did you not hear me?" Jake demanded, pointing the spoon at the Deathmaw like a weapon. "Out of my kitchen. I don't care if you're an apex predator, a primordial god, or the Emperor's personal pet. This is MY domain, and dinner service starts in 45 minutes. The Deathmaw's brain, evolved for hunting across dozens of different worlds, struggled to process this. The creature's 6 eyes studied the human more carefully, looking for signs of disease, chemical intoxication, brain parasites, something to explain this aberrant behavior. Jake took a step forward. The Deathmaw, 300 years old, veteran of 100 hunts, killer of thousands, took a step back. "That's right," Jake said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "You're in MY territory now. You see this?" He gestured around the kitchen with the spoon. "Everything in here is arranged exactly how I need it. The knives are organized by size. The spices are alphabetized. The pans are sorted by heat capacity. It took me 2 weeks to get this kitchen running the way I want it, and I will be damned if I let some overgrown lizard with delusions of grandeur mess it up." The Deathmaw's head tilted. Its predatory brain was screaming contradictory information. The creature before it was prey, small, weak, vulnerable. But the body language, the tone, the absolute confidence radiating from the human, those were the signals of an apex predator defending its territory. In the security hub, Vraltek watched in stunned silence as Jake took another step forward, and the Deathmaw took another step back. "Sir," his assistant whispered, "is the human, is he asserting dominance over the apex predator?" I don't know," Vraltek admitted. "This shouldn't be possible. The Deathmaw has a brain the size of a human head, refined hunting instincts, and 3 centuries of predatory experience. It should recognize the human as easy prey and—" Jake took another step forward. The Deathmaw's retreat continued. "This is a kitchen," Jake continued, his voice taking on the tone of a professor lecturing a particularly dense student. "Do you know what that means? It means fire." He gestured to the 6 industrial burners, all blazing with carefully controlled flames. It means hot surfaces. He pointed to the banks of ovens, their internal temperatures hovering around 200 degrees Celsius. It means sharp objects. Jake grabbed a knife from the magnetic strip on the wall, a 10-inch chef's knife that gleamed under the kitchen lights. He held it up so the Deathmaw could see it clearly. This is high-carbon steel, folded 300 times, sharpened to a molecular edge. I use it to break down entire sides of beef, to deb-one animals that would eat you for breakfast, to slice through flesh and sinew and bone with the precision of a surgeon. He set the knife down with a sharp click against the cutting board. And you know what the scary part is, Mittens? Every sentient species in this galaxy uses tools like this. Because we're not apex predators by accident of evolution. The Deathmaw's pupils contracted. Something in its ancient predator brain was starting to understand. We're apex predators by choice, Jake said, his voice soft and dangerous. Your species evolved in the deep jungles of Kravathi Prime. You developed those scales over millions of years to resist the bites of your competitors. Those claws grew sharp to tear through the hide of your prey. You became what you are through natural selection, the slow, grinding process of evolution weeding out the weak. Jake stepped closer, and this time the Deathmaw didn't just step back. It flattened itself slightly, a posture that in Kravathi body language indicated uncertainty. But humans, Jake laughed, the sound echoing through the kitchen. We don't have scales. We don't have claws. We don't have venom or armored plates or compound eyes. You know why? Because we didn't need them. We took the fire that should have killed us and made it cook our food. We took the rocks that littered our world and sharpened them into weapons. We looked at animals twice our size, 3 times our weight, and we figured out how to kill them anyway. In the security hub, Vraltek was pulling up data on human evolution, his hands trembling as the information scrolled across his screen. By the void, he whispered. I never really looked at their history before. They hunted everything on their planet to dominance. Woolly mammoths, massive creatures with natural weapons. Extinct. Cave bears, apex predators that outweighed them 3-1. Extinct. They didn't just survive, they conquered. Every major predator on their world either died out or learned to fear them. His assistant stared at the screen. But sir, Earth isn't classified as a death world. It's only a Class 4 hazard rating. Because humans made it safe, Vraltek realized, his voice hollow. They killed everything that threatened them, then domesticated what was left. They didn't adapt to their environment. They adapted their environment to them. On the screen, Jake was still advancing on the Deathmaw, and now the creature's behavior had completely changed. Its head was low, not in an attack crouch, but in submission. Its tail, which had been lashing with aggressive intent, was now tucked slightly. My species, Jake said, his voice carrying the weight of tens of thousands of years of human history, spent 100,000 years figuring out increasingly creative ways to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and faster than us. You think your scales are tough? We invented weapons that could punch through armor plate. You think your claws are sharp? We engineered blades at the molecular level. You think your hunting instincts are refined? We developed persistence hunting, the ability to chase prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. The Deathmaw's compound eyes were now fixed on Jake with something that looked like recognition, perhaps even respect. So when I tell you to get out of my kitchen, Jake said, his voice dropping to a growl that somehow carried more menace than the Deathmaw's predatory rumble. I'm not asking as prey begging for mercy. I'm telling you as the apex predator on this station. This is MY territory, and you're not welcome here. The Deathmaw lowered its head completely. What happened next would be discussed in xenobiology circles for decades to come. The Kravathi Deathmaw, 300-year-old apex predator, veteran of countless hunts across a dozen worlds, made a sound that no researcher had ever recorded in the wild. It whimpered. The noise was soft, almost questioning, as if the creature's entire worldview had just been shattered and it was trying to understand its new place in the hierarchy. Its massive body, which moments ago had been coiled for a lethal strike, now seemed almost uncertain. Jake's expression softened slightly. He lowered the knife, setting it back on the counter with deliberate care. "Look," he said, his voice losing some of its hard edge. "I get it. You're scared. You got transported off your homeworld, stuck in a cage, probably poked and prodded by researchers who didn't understand that you're not just some dumb animal. You're a person, a predator, yes, but a sapient one. And when you got the chance, you broke out. I respect that." The Deathmaw's head tilted again, this time in what looked like curiosity rather than aggression. Its thermal sensors swept over Jake again, but now they seemed to be analyzing rather than targeting. "But here's the thing about humans," Jake continued, moving back to his stove and checking the temperature of his beef bourguignon. "We're not just apex predators. We're also the species that decided some of the deadliest predators on our world would make good pets. You hear what I'm saying? We took wolves, pack hunters that could rip us apart, and we turned them into dogs that sleep in our beds and play with our children." In the security hub, Vraltek was now frantically reading about Earth's domestication history. Wolves, tigers, bears. They kept them as companions. They chose to live alongside apex predators. What kind of insane species? "Sir," his assistant interrupted, pointing at the screen. "Is the human? Is he offering it food?" Indeed, Jake had pulled out a large raw steak from the refrigeration unit. A massive cut of meat that had been intended for tomorrow's dinner service. He tossed it across the kitchen. It landed on the floor about 10 feet from the Deathmaw. "There," Jake said. "That's ethically sourced meat from a farm on the agricultural deck. No sapients were harmed in its production. If you're hungry, eat that. But you do not eat my bourguignon, you do not mess up my kitchen, and you definitely do not eat any of my staff or customers. We clear, Mittens?" The Deathmaw looked at the meat, then at Jake, then back at the meat. Slowly, cautiously, it moved forward and sniffed the offering. Its forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air around the steak. Then, in a movement almost too fast to see, it snatched up the meat and retreated to the corner of the kitchen, where it began to eat. But its 6 eyes never left Jake. "Good," Jake said, nodding with satisfaction. "See? We can be civilized about this. You stay in that corner, I finish my dinner prep, and nobody has to call in the military to blow a hole in my kitchen. Sound like a plan?" The Deathmaw, impossibly, made a soft chewing sound that xenolinguistics would later classify as acknowledgement. Vraltek felt his 4 eyes beginning to strain from how wide they'd opened. He just negotiated a territorial agreement with a Kravathi Deathmaw. In less than 10 minutes. Without weapons. Without armor. Just through. Attitude? His assistant offered weakly. Through being more of an apex predator than the actual apex predator. Vraltek corrected, his voice filled with something between awe and terror. On the screen, Jake had returned to his cooking, stirring his bourguignon with one hand while checking his soufflés with the other. The Deathmaw finished its steak and settled into a resting position, its body language now completely relaxed. It watched Jake work with what could only be described as fascination. "I need to update the human species threat assessment," Vraltek muttered. "Immediately. What classification should I put?" his assistant asked. Vraltek watched as Jake expertly plated a test portion, tasted it, and made a satisfied noise. "Extreme, Class 12, Apex Social Predator." And add a note. "Do not interrupt them while cooking." 45 minutes later, Station Kepler-7's main dining hall opened for dinner service right on schedule. The guests who had been evacuated to the safe zones were initially hesitant to return, but the all-clear had been sounded, and the aroma wafting from the kitchen was impossible to resist. Jake's beef bourguignon was legendary throughout the sector, and the promise of freshly made soufflés was enough to overcome even the most prudent survival instincts. What they didn't expect was the sight that greeted them in the kitchen's viewing window. Jake worked his usual magic at the stove, calling out orders to his sous chefs with the precision of a military commander. Plates flew, garnishes appeared with artistic flair, and the symphony of a professional kitchen in full operation filled the air with its familiar sounds. And in the corner, curled up on what appeared to be several dozen cushions that someone had hastily assembled, was the Kravathi Deathmaw. It watched the kitchen operations with obvious interest, its head following the movement of food from station to station. Occasionally, Jake would toss it a scrap of meat, always with a casual "Here, Mittens," and the apex predator would catch it with surprising delicacy. Commander Vraltek stood at the dining hall entrance, watching this impossible scene unfold. He'd ordered the security teams to maintain a perimeter, just in case, but even the most cautious tactical assessment suggested the Deathmaw had no intention of attacking anyone. "I don't understand," a Saurian diplomat whispered, her scales rippling with confusion. "Why hasn't it killed anyone? Kravathi Deathmaws are obligate carnivores. They need fresh meat regularly, and they have a documented preference for sapient prey." Vraltek gestured to the corner, where the Deathmaw was contentedly gnawing on what appeared to be a massive bone. "The human is feeding it regularly. High-quality protein from the agricultural deck. And more than that." He paused, choosing his words carefully. The human established dominance. The Deathmaw recognized him as a superior apex predator and accepted a subordinate role in his territory. "But humans aren't," the diplomat began. "Aren't they?" Vraltek interrupted. "I've been reviewing their history. The xenobiology team sent me their full dossier. Do you know what humans did when they encountered apex predators on their homeworld? They didn't hide. They didn't build bigger walls. They hunted them, and when they got bored with hunting them, they domesticated them. They turned the most dangerous predators on their planet into companions, workers, even family members." He pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's domestication timeline. Wolves to dogs, wild cats to house cats, even bears and big cats kept as exotic companions. "They're not apex predators by physical adaptation," Vraltek explained. "They're apex predators by psychology. They genuinely don't recognize anything as a superior threat. Every challenge is just a problem to be solved. Every predator is just a potential resource to be exploited or ally to be recruited. It's not stupidity. It's complete, utter confidence in their ability to overcome any obstacle." The Saurian diplomat stared at the kitchen. "And the Deathmaw just accepted this?" "The Deathmaw recognized it," Vraltek corrected. "On some fundamental level, it understood that the human was operating on a completely different level of predation. Physical strength doesn't matter when you can create fire. Natural weapons don't matter when you can forge better ones. Evolved hunting instincts don't matter when you can develop strategy and tactics that completely bypass them." In the kitchen, Jake finished plating the evening special, a perfectly seared steak with a red wine reduction, roasted vegetables, and a delicate herb garnish. He rang the bell, and a server scurried forward to deliver it to a waiting table. Then Jake turned to the Deathmaw and spoke in that same casual, confident tone. "Good work tonight, Mittens. You didn't eat anyone, didn't knock over any equipment, and you stayed in your corner like I asked. You're learning." The Deathmaw, apex predator, terror of a dozen worlds, classified as a level 9 threat, made that soft chewing sound again. "Tomorrow we're doing a seafood risotto," Jake continued, already prepping for the next day's menu. "You'll like that. I'll save you some of the tuna. Now go on, security is going to escort you back to a proper habitat. One with actual space to move around, not that cramped cage they had you in." The Deathmaw stood, and several security officers flinched backward, their hands on their weapons. But the creature simply walked calmly toward the exit, passing within inches of terrified guests who pressed themselves against the walls. At the doorway, it paused and looked back at Jake one final time. Jake waved his spatula in salute. "See you tomorrow, Mittens." The apex predator left peacefully, flanked by security personnel who looked like they might faint at any moment. The story of Jake Rodriguez and the Kravathi Deathmaw spread through Station Kepler-7 like wildfire, then jumped to the broader galactic network within days. Within a week, xenobiologists from across known space were requesting permission to study the interaction. Within a month, the Galactic Council had opened an inquiry into proper human threat classification. But for Jake, it was just another Tuesday. "The secret," he explained to a documentary crew that had arrived to film the phenomenon, "isn't that humans are physically superior. We're not. I'm 5'6" and I've got a dad bod. That Deathmaw could rip me in half without breaking a sweat. The Deathmaw, now officially designated as a station resident rather than a research subject, lounged in its upgraded habitat visible through the kitchen window. It had been there every day since the incident, watching Jake work with what researchers were calling unprecedented social bonding behavior for the species. The secret, Jake continued, stirring a pot of gumbo, is that humans never forgot we were predators. We built cities, invented computers, traveled to the stars, but we never lost that core instinct. We just refined it, evolved it, turned physical predation into social predation, hunting instinct into competitive drive, territorial aggression into professional pride. He gestured around his kitchen with obvious satisfaction. This is my territory, not because I can physically fight off every threat, but because I claimed it, I maintain it, and I defend it through skill, determination, and sheer stubbornness. That's what makes humans apex predators. Not our teeth, not our claws, our attitude. The Deathmaw, hearing its name, or rather its nickname, looked up and made that distinctive chewing sound. Yeah, Mittens, Jake called over. I'll save you some gumbo, but you're getting the mild version. Last time I gave you the spicy stuff you had hiccups for 3 hours. Commander Vraltek, watching from the dining area, updated his final report. Human classification. Apex social predator. Threat level extreme. Recommendation. Maintain positive relations at all costs. Under no circumstances interrupt during meal preparation. Additional note. They can apparently domesticate anything. So what happened next? How did the Galactic Council respond to the threat assessment? And what other apex predators might encounter humanity's unique approach to the food chain? Backhand index pointing right, find out in the next story. Hit subscribe and the bell so you don't miss what happens when humans meet the galaxy's other nightmare creatures. Because if we can domesticate a Deathmaw, what else might we turn into a pet? Drop a comment. What Earth predator would you want to see go up against an alien apex predator? Let me know below.